Welcome to He Talks, a platform
Thank you.
set up by human engineers to have engaging conversations with thought leaders to help us understand and also unravel the future which is before us in the area of future of work. I'm pleased to have today on our show Ashish Kushu, who is the Chief Technology Officer of L&T Technology Services. He has over 28 years of experience and has held leadership positions in large reputed organizations. And it's a privilege and pleasure to have Ashish on the show. Ashish, welcome to the show and thank you for coming on the show.
Ranjan, thank you very much for having me here. It's really a privilege to interact with you. I've got to meet you and know you in the last few interactions. It's an honor and a privilege to share this forum along with you. And I hope the discussion that we have provides us enough insights as well as is thought-provoking for ourselves as well as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish, and look forward to your sharing with us how the future of technology is going to unravel before us. In many parts of our lives and business, technology is playing a dual role of an enabler and a disruptor. Digitization is bringing about sweeping changes in the lives of individuals and businesses. Digital technologies are radically impacting the manner in which work is being carried out in organizations. The World Economic Forum acknowledged in its Future of Jobs report, we are entering a fourth industrial revolution. Developments in previously disjointed fields such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, nanotechnology, 3D printing, genetics are all building on and amplifying one another. It goes on to say that more than a third of the desired core skill sets of most occupations will be comprised of skills that are not yet considered crucial to their job today. We are watching the domain of machine and mechanical aided work extend much further into the realms of what has typically been seen, the domain of human beings. We are now in a world where we are replacing human beings with sophisticated algorithms and nimble robotics. The challenge, therefore, is comprehending the impending changes and creating and analyzing new relationships between humans, technologies, society, business, and government. The key to surviving this industrial revolution is in leading it. It requires two elements. One is awareness of the impending disruption to be caused by technology, and second, to plan to develop talent that can keep pace with it or create disruption that others must respond. So Ashish, before we can go ahead with some of the questions, I just would like to say a few introductory words and set the context for our discussions today.
Thanks, Ranjan. And, these reports that you mention and the type of changes that you've been mentioning, these have been in the realm of public debate and discussions with customers and commentators and analysts have spoken a lot on these subjects. I would give you my understanding and my perspective of what's happening, and perhaps that will give you an idea of the space and point from where I come personally and as a professional. One is that I think we need to first demystify this whole digitization and disruption and machines taking over jobs, etc., etc. Second is we also need to understand and demystify this artificial intelligence and automation related discussions which naturally get people to believe that they are going to replace humans or they're going to replace jobs.
Right.
So I'd like to sort of give you my perspective of what I believe is the way going forward in these two areas, and then possibly we could take it from there. First is that, look, industrialization and digitization is, I should stick to industrialization. Industrialization and automation is not new. It's been happening for the last so many decades.
Yes.
And in various shapes, size, forms. And it has never led to a loss of jobs anywhere in any economy. It never has. it has resulted in a shift in the nature of jobs that it has created, but it has never ever resulted in job loss ever anywhere. I mean, I don't think of, I don't see any statistic or whatever readings I have done or interacted with customers. Yes, it has led to shift in the nature of jobs.
Right.
Now that has its own issues, that has its own complications, but that's a different point. Second thing is artificial intelligence. Again, when you talk of artificial intelligence and you talk of increasing digitization, this is not going to replace humans at all. No way, I don't think so. What's happening is that we're taking our what's happening really is that all the data that we are gathering and all the different possibilities that we have to gather data, we're now trying to make sense of it. We're trying to correlate that data and see how it can help us in various aspects of life, right?
Right.
And that's what analytics is. And when you're putting an engine on top of analytics, which says that, look, instead of you thinking a lot more, can you have a system by means of which the software in itself can start deriving certain conclusions and recommending a few actions? And that's really very simply put the domain of artificial intelligence. So I don't think it's going to help help the cause of unemployment or loss of jobs in any way. On the contrary, in my view, what will happen is pervasive use of technology for once. And if you then look at the world economy, if you look at the number of people below poverty line, there is only one way in which they can come up and be a middle class country or a rich country, and that's only through technology innovation and technology intervention. For a country like India, which is in many ways lower middle class or middle class from a GDP perspective or per capita income perspective,
right,
$1,000 per capita. If we have the aspiration to go to $40,000 per capita income in a very short span of time, which means lifting a large number of people above the poverty line, that can only happen if we have technology intervention happening at a mass scale. So to my mind, these things are only going to enable prosperity. They're going to lead to disruptions of a certain kind, but definitely not job losses. Empowerment, governments will connect with citizens a lot more. Citizens will demand their rights and will know a lot about their lives a lot more. So technology has a very, very important role to play from that perspective. So when I look at these discussions or these topics, I have this perspective and landscape in mind. And that's how I look at whatever is happening in the discussion.
So we are seeing technology more as an enabler than a disruptor going forward.
Absolutely. I think the disruption of technology, when we say disruptor, we need to again sort of understand what does it mean. Yes, it is a disruption when, for a person like me, I have to talk to Alexa. I'm not used to Alexa, right? I mean, I'm not used to Alexa. So that's disruption for me.
Right.
Or write any longer. I don't see my children write. So I see them typing a lot. So I'm losing touch with writing. So that's disruption. So disruption is in the way we behave and in the way we operate. Technology in itself helps the cause of changing things. So to that extent, it's a disruption, but not from a negative sense of that the word otherwise implies. Not at all. Very truly an enabler. Very truly the only way in which people or India. So let's talk specifically of India. If India has to become a country with a aspiration to have a per capita income anywhere above $30,000 or $40,000 per annum, the only way it can happen is if there is technology assisting the government and a society to empower people and enable people. So to that extent, it is definitely not a disruption.
And realize Modi's dreams of a 5 trillion economy by 2025.
Should happen. I mean, it should happen.
So there's technology will have this is the only way we can enable that to happen. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. You look at what happened in the last few days of this pandemic. When the government said that they are going to, transfer 500 rupees in the account of people below a certain economic line or of a certain financial strata. They did it digitally, right? They
Absolutely.
just did it digitally. So was it possible otherwise 10 years back? No. So there are many, many ways in which technology can be an enabler. So to my mind, there is no way in hell I would like to categorize technology as anything but an enabler. It has its own spin-offs in terms of the changes it expects us to adopt. Well, that's not too much of a issue, really.
So let's now talk about technology, Ashish. So what do you think are some of the key trends that you foresee in the future? Because now people talk about AI, talk about Industry 4.0, talk about whole lot of other IoTs and smart cities and smart machines and whole lot of things. So what do you think are some of the key trends or key technologies that is evolving before us and you can foresee for the future? I know it's a very, I'm asking at a very
No,
broad
but
level.
I don't mind taking bets and making a fool of myself. So I think voice.
Okay.
I think what's happening to AI is commoditization of AI. It's just that the underlying compute and network infrastructure is becoming so cheap and affordable,
Right.
and that data is being made available through various sensorization, etc., and softwares, aggregating this information. So to my mind, AI is really all about commoditization, and it's happening at a very fast speed. So that's not a big deal. To my mind, Industry 4.0 digitization is again nothing so very dramatic. It is incremental or slightly a bigger step, if one may want to say.
Right.
To my mind, voice. What one again does not understand is that there is a very large population of the world which is underpenetrated from a technology usage perspective. I'd like to come back to India, for example, to set the context. Even in India, if you look at the number of people who are accessing or talking or consuming information in local languages, that is far more than the number of people engaging in such activity through English. Now, you can't expect everybody to learn English.
Right.
So if you have to take technology to the last person and get him to adopt and adapt to technology and use it for his own betterment, for his own social empowerment as well as economic upliftment, you have to have voice which comes in. Voice which will enable people to interact, operate, translate, etc., etc. And to my mind, that's the big thing that's going to happen in the next few years, and that will perhaps break lots and lots of barriers. Take this example to the globe and across the globe, and you realize that the same problem exists across the globe. The number of people who speak English is far less. Therefore, to my mind, the next technology which will actually cause disruption, like the way smartphone enabled people, would be voice.
Right.
How can we get our systems and our processes and our applications to interact with people in the local language, and then take it and then do all that is required at the back end to make use of the data and information and interact with the backend system? So I would place my bet there.
So do you think Google Translator has made our life easy?
Yeah, on the face of it, for people like us, yes, but a lot more to be done. And Amazon perhaps, I could be wrong, but Amazon perhaps is way ahead of what they're doing with voice technologies.
Right. What about manufacturing? The 3D printing looks to be very promising and maybe even threatening to some traditional industries in manufacturing. So is 3D printing a big way, taking over in a big way?
Yes. I think again, 3D printing, yes, we see it in our customer base as well. We see how people have started exploring 3D printing in a big way. But again, I would say it's initial stages. There's lots of studies and a lot of work to be done when it comes to materials, to ruggedity, to compliance, to many other related issues, to structures, etc., etc. So definitely something that a large number of people are interested in. But again, perhaps few years away from big adoption. For small parts, perhaps, yeah, but for more complex uh, industrial parts, it's still a few years away.
Right. Um, what about supply chain now? Do you think with the coronavirus pandemic as a example, it's going to be less of touch in future? People are talking about no touch relationships going about in the future. So do you think delivery through drones will become the future?
There are, your question has three aspects to it. One is no touch, delivery through drones, and supply chain. I think there are three different elements involved here. For one, I'm not sure that, ultimately, we're all humans, and nothing substitutes social interaction. Right?
Right.
Nothing, it just does not. We're talking like this, but I'm sure we would have been far more comfortable if we would have been in person. So I think things will come back. We'll be a little bit more cautious, but perhaps Namaste will come back. I'll be happy if it does. But we'll be a little bit more conscious, but I don't think social interactions are going to go away so easily. That's number one. Number two is that when it comes to drones, the issue is not drones. That technology exists in various shapes, size, forms. I don't think delivery through drones is a problem. I think it's got to do with the whole standardization of how drones will be operated in a different in a country. There are legislative issues, there are regulatory issues, there are compliance issues, there are security issues. How do you manage the drone traffic? Who do you allow? How do you ensure that they do what they're supposed to be doing? What happens if there's an accident, and who is liable for? So there are non-technology related issues which have got to do with the operations of drone. That's a problem. Yes, things like this, situations like this will lead to people accelerating that discussion a little bit more. So drones can become in future a vehicle for supply chain, for supplying goods and personal consumables. But what I am fairly very, very confident about and sure about is that all those companies which had not built a very robust technology enabled supply chain,
Right.
they will pay for that investment. You have to have a supply chain which requires minimal disruption. It is well linked to your end consumers. It is well linked to your banking system. It is well linked to your manufacturing lines. It is well linked to your CRM, to your supply, to the partners who are very key to supply chain. So I think that's going to happen in a big way, in a very, very big way.
Right.
What this pandemic shows us is that a lot of the work that was being done right now manually or semi-manually, that can be automated. And there's no reason why you will not see people adopting technology to ensure that this becomes far more efficient, streamlined across the board. Manufacturing, inventory, customer, your own systems, your own manufacturing, etc., etc. So I think that will definitely happen in a big way.
Ashish, in a few years from now, the most disruptive emerging technologies of our modern era now, which is in their infancy stage, will be ready for prime time and will disrupt business and even societies in unimaginable ways, like whatever technology we talked about so far. So do you think, are we ready for this seismic shift that will happen in the blink of an eye? Are we aware of the challenges and the opportunities that lies ahead of us?
It sounds that I'm not agreeing with most of the things. It's just that I'm being myself. So I don't think it is so rapid as it is made out to be. For example, look, when the Y2K happened,
Right.
we knew Y2K will happen for 2 years, right? And the industry did manage to manage the transition. Similarly, there have been many, many technology transitions that have happened over the last 3-4 decades, whether it is telecom, whether it is banking, whether it is retail, whether it is if it is usage of technology in its aspects. So I don't think it's going to be, blink your eyes and there it is. It's a gradual change.
Okay.
And whatever technologies that we are talking of today, for example, let's take one by one. So again, I mean, the reason I want to, sort of, Ranjan, always demystify this is that the moment you start looking at some of these things from a more simplistic manner, you're not in awe of these. You know that you can grapple them, that you can learn them, that
Right.
there is nothing so great about these transitions. It's happened in the past, it'll happen in the future. It's just a part of our lives, right? Once you're in the IT industry. You take AR, VR, right? It's existed. There was visual simulation, there was virtual reality, there was AR, VR, there were different type of sensors, there were head-mounted devices way back in the early 90s. You take artificial intelligence, you take analytics. I mean, look, have people not been predicting about the weather for the last 2 decades, and every year the accuracy is becoming better by the day? Don't we have satellites in the space launched as early as the late 50s or the 60s, and they are transmitting huge amount of data? They're being monitored remotely. There's a lot of mechatronics which is out there,
right?
And they have right material science capabilities, launch capabilities, the physics, the maths. Every aspect that we talk of today is up there in the space, right?
Right.
You take drones. What about all these unidentified,
UFOs?
Bombing so many countries all the time. So I think all of these technologies have existed, are maturing, and as they mature, they are becoming slightly more pervasive in the way other companies or other industries have started using them. And then comes a point that they become affordable.
Right.
The moment they become affordable, they reach out to us. But in that whole journey, a lot of discussion, debate has happened. People have got used to it. People reconcile to the fact that something new is going to come, and we have to adapt to it. We have to adopt it. We have to relearn. We have to reskill, etc., etc. So it's always gradual, manual to typewriter to PC. So we've seen it all, right? So I think we'll be prepared. I don't see any reason why we as a society or as companies in this industry will not be prepared. Absolutely not, because we are a part of this journey as it goes along, because it's all a question of these technologies maturing so that they can become a lot more commoditized for general purpose daily applications.
That's very reassuring, Ashish, and I'm only playing a devil's advocate, and I want a reaffirmation from experts like you, which is showing the positive side of the future.
No, right. Many times we have this whole issue within our organizations as well, that when you go to a guy who's doing mechanical or civil and you ask him, why are you not going to learn some new technologies? He has this thing in his mind that, I'm a mechanical guy.
Absolutely.
What am I going to do with software? But then you have to explain to him what's mechatronics,
right?
What is robotics? What is an autonomous car? All of them have mechanical functions. They have mechanical designs. They have very, very intricate mechanical designs, and they interact a lot with the software and the embedded electronics. So the moment you show them and explain to them and demystify that, look, an autonomous car is so much about mechatronics, about how braking interacts with computer software, which tells the brake to brake or accelerate in those milliseconds, and therefore the application of brake has to be in a certain calibrated manner. So you design the braking system. When you start looking at some of these technologies as incremental to whatever we are doing right now, this whole issue of can people reskill, can people learn, can I learn, can I adapt, all of this becomes much more simpler to handle. Otherwise, it's very, very complex. It serves nobody's cause.
So Ashish, the next one is of course a very tricky one. With the advancement in technologies and automation, we are staring at a jobless growth. Now, the governments are now facing a profound questions about the nature and future directions of their economies. According to McKinsey report, by 2030, robots will replace about 800 million jobs that are currently performed by people. Oxford University says in its research that by 2040, working nations could see job losses of up to 47%. So my question to you, Ashish, is if more and more people are being made permanently unemployed, how could they afford to buy goods and services needed to stimulate growth?
Uh, uh, Ranjan, I'll talk from the context of India. I think that's slightly better. We are hovering around a $3 trillion economy. And I said as per capita income is somewhere around $3,000.
Right.
Expected to go to $5 trillion economy. And then we are expected to grow to $10 trillion economy over the next 10 to 12 years.
Right.
Going to be $10 trillion economy where who will work to make this economy a reality? It's not that jobs are going to be created only in the IT industry. Jobs will be in manufacturing, jobs will be in agriculture, they will be in other services companies, there will be many other allied sectors where there will be growth, right? And if that growth happens, we go to a $10 trillion economy. And I'm no one to question McKinsey or Oxford University. They're masters and they know what they're talking. But who will work in this $10 trillion economy?
Right.
Do you think there will be no jobs which will come? Of course there will be. I've heard the same argument when I was younger, when we heard of typewriters being replaced by
computers,
electronic typewriters by computers. I have not seen this country go back. So maybe they are talking of a mature economy where the per capita income is already around $55,000. You have to see the issue of job creation and job losses or job replacements from an economic perspective and an economic lens, not from a technology lens, especially in a country like India. I mean, $3 trillion going to $10 trillion, you can't, it's unimaginable for me that everything here would be done by robots. So no, jobs will definitely undergo a change. The nature of jobs will undergo a change. So if there are people who are doing manual testing right now, they will start using tools to do automation. If there are people doing manufacturing, some parts of manufacturing all by themselves manually, they will get replaced by robots. But remember, if you're going to be $10 trillion economy, the scale of manufacturing has to increase. Absolutely. If we are going to be a $10 trillion economy, our services, our consumption of IT will increase. So we will go up the value chain in terms of the type of work that we do. So I am not at all convinced or going to buy into this argument that when it comes to countries like us, which are per capita income at around $3,000 with a potential to go to $54,000, $54,000 or $55,000, which is
10 times
the developed country's GDP. So the headroom to grow is so much that there would be a job loss. You take China. When China grew from $3 trillion to $10 trillion, or now they're $12 or $13 trillion, has there been a job loss there? No. So our situation is different. The situation of countries in our space with headroom to grow is different. Therefore, technology will enable that growth. There will be different type of jobs that we will do. Automation will help us move up the value chain in the services that we deliver to our customers and in the way we consume services. But there is no way in hell I would like to believe that jobs will be an issue, especially when it comes to countries like us.
Well said, Ashish. People have to move up the value chain to keep pace with the technology and find newer jobs. So the next one is, Ashish, there is an increasing isolation from human interaction and increased balkanization of knowledge and understanding. With so much of technological advancement and many human operations being replaced by automation and robots, what will happen to the human touch? Will this world become boring and artificial, and we will live perennially in a virtual world or virtual life?
if you read Isaac Asimov or you read Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, that's what it appears to be. But it's I don't know how I don't know how it would be 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, but definitely in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't see that the human touch, the human interactions will get replaced. I will not be able to comment on what may happen 2 decades down the line.
Right.
I don't see that going away right now. And again, as I said, the context is the state in which we are as an economy, right? We will soon overcome this COVID thing, right? Because there is so much energy, possibilities, potential, kinetic energy available in this country where growth is the only path available and visible to us. The energy of such a nation will sort of throw away everything else and just pursue growth. And once that happens, you will have human interactions, you will have a lot more of human dynamism and dynamics coming to play. So I don't see it going away in the next decade or so. I don't know what will happen 15 or 20 years.
So the last question, Ashish, is it turns out that the hardest thing that companies have isn't about building technology, but getting people to use it and leverage technology. You have graduated a few decades back, but how are you keeping yourself updated and relevant to technology? And what does one need to do to be updated and stay relevant?
It's a very difficult question.
I'm sure what you studied and what I studied in college, it's probably of no relevance today, but how did you keep yourself relevant, stay updated? And now you're in a position to even guide and provide direction to your company.
There is no short answer to this, and there is no accurate answer to this. And I don't know how to really pen it down in a few lines. Society with what's happening in technology, and then try to relate it to the interactions I've had with the customers. When you talk to a customer, keeping in mind the economics in which the sphere of economics in which he's operating, you're able to understand a lot of discussions and point of views that he's bringing to the table. You're able to empathize with what he believes is his priority and is compelling,
right.
Compelling reasons for doing something. And when you're also interested in technology, you're also a little bit more curious, and you're able to engage in those conversations and learn on your own, or learn through customer interaction or internal interactions with employees or youngsters. And you also get to, and when you're aware of what's happening in society from a societal dynamics perspective, and you're able to relate some of these things, automatically automatically one gets to a sweet spot where you can start spotting or start appreciating or understanding what is causing change, why is it causing change, and what are the factors driving change. And that factor is really, one of those factors is technology. And then that sort of drives you a lot more in seeking opportunities or working in areas and develop a passion for this equation. I think I'm just speaking extempore. So I think that's the zone I'm in. I am always correlating some of these things. So when I look at technology disruption, that's exactly what I look at. I look at the economics. I look at the changes in society, the way societies are emerging. I look at the past of technology implementations within our customer base or outside in other associated spheres like space or defense or automotive, and then sort of try to correlate and do your own machine learning ML model, build your own models. And that sort of gives you a slightly better perspective of what's happening and what may happen.
You should have your antennas always, ready. And
absolutely.
And also identify what's your core competence, right?
Absolutely. I think the biggest mistake, if I may, with due respect to many, the biggest mistake that we do, and a large number of people I work with in my team or do, is that we do not see things in context. We look at what's happening right now, believing that this is what it is, this is where the Big Bang started, and this is where the Big Bang will end.
Right.
We do not understand that, and we do not appreciate or acknowledge that what we are doing right now is a part of the journey which started much earlier. We are at a part where it is maturing and it's finding its own ways, and in the future it will go on like the way it has gone on, like the way it has arrived at this moment, it will find its next moment. If you're able to relate to your work and the technologies and your approach from that spectrum, you'll find it easier to understand why we are doing what we are doing right now and where exactly would it take us. And when you know where it will take us, for example, you take artificial intelligence, for example, the fundamental thing is that it needs data, right? Then you need to make sense of the data. Now, the industries where you have data are already using it, and the industries who don't have the data can't do anything about it. Weather modeling in late 80s and early 90s used to have a lot of data crunching which was happening, and it required supercomputing capabilities. Supercomputers used to be there. Now, the same amount of computing can happen on your mobile phone.
Absolutely.
So therefore, computing is coming down, software is maturing, so automatically it will become much more affordable. So if you start looking at every technology change or application change or anything that you do from this spectrum of the last few years to what may happen, what is the natural gradual journey it will undertake, things become far more simpler and easier to comprehend, is my experience.
And from being an HR guy, from an individual perspective, I think people used to say, jack of all trades and master of none. But now there's a new theory which talks about the team style of management, where they say you should have a little bit of breadth at the same time depth. So you should probably be a jack of all trades and master of at least one.
Absolutely.
Ashish, I think to sum up, I would say that almost 50 years back, the cover of Life magazine, I don't know, Life magazine doesn't exist now, but Life was very popular those days. 50 years back, Life magazine declared the point of no return for everybody when the first computer, just came up in the horizon. Above that stark warning was this: automation is really here, jobs go scarce. And this was 50 years back. And as you rightly said, for the rest of the world, jobs boom, and in the following decades, more than 1 billion people were added to the employment rolls. Poverty was lifted out of most of the places, and the GDPs and economies were booming. Right? Surely the world will be different in future, but I think the key variable is in understanding that the future is rarely technology alone, but how humans use it, perceive it, and adapt to it will be the key to planning for the future of work. And I am an optimist, and I, for one, envision a world where technology will enable success and prosperity of the mankind. So, Ashish, before we wrap up, a few closing words, and then we'll wrap it
up. Thank you, Ranjan. I'm very, very optimistic. I love science fictions, but I know that I also know in my heart of hearts that humans will adapt, humans will change.
Right.
There is no impending threat on account of technology to our lives. It's only going to empower a large section of a society. We need to see it in the right perspective. It's for us to ride the tiger, and this is the only way for us to grow. Having said that, very, very exciting times. So much is happening, so much is changing, so much is being enabled by technology adoption across the globe that it is unprecedented adoption of technology. So I think it's a great to be in, and the next 4-5 years will be equally that great.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for
Thank you.
sharing your knowledge, experience, and wisdom to us, and trying to reassure to us that technology is an enabler and not a disruptor.
Thank you, Ranjan. Thank you very much.